head physical therapist at PhysioX in Needham. Oh, wrong button. There we go. Okay, so I'll take you guys back a little bit. It's been now 10 years. So I was 22, right out of undergrad, got this dream job, wanted to always work baseball. And so part of my responsibilities when I was there is obviously taking care of these athletes. I call it lifeguarding on dry land because I'm just watching some baseball games, seeing if any of these guys get hurt. But another part of my job was also to supervise this arm care program, do any prehab, rehab that any of these guys needed. All right, so this program that was set up by people way on top of me, because this was my first year, I was just going along with it, was just consistent of your regular rotator cuff exercises or scapular stable exercises that were done in various different positions. So they would start with some standing, then they would go into side lying on a table, then they would go prone and do your standard I-wise T's that I'm sure many of you have seen in the rehab world for anyone dealing with some shoulder issues. But as I kept going along my journey and learning, I kind of started to realize that this was very cookie cutter. So anyone that got hurt, it didn't matter if it was a pitcher, if it was a hitter, anyone dealing with any type of shoulder pain, they were getting all these same exercises. Now, I'm not saying that these exercises are bad, but they all have their time and place, but there was definitely a lack of individualization and seeing what people actually really needed in order to combat any of these struggles. So I was seeing a lot of rotator cuff injuries, a lot of labrum tears, a lot of UCL, Tommy Johns, if any of you guys are baseball fans. There's a huge spike in it right now. And I think if we can look at the body a little bit differently, then we might actually be able to solve some of these issues and have them stop from happening in the first place. So going through all this, one of the questions that always popped up in my head was, why do these injuries still keep happening if we're doing these prehab drills, right, for these guys? And I'll take you along a little bit of the journey of kind of what I've learned now and a lot of things that I would do differently knowing what I know now as a physical therapist and looking at this whole body that's interconnected, looking at it through the nervous system lens and how we can make some bigger changes and quicker changes for some of these people. So one of the biggest things I started learning over time after I decided to leave and go in to get more schooling was this big misconception around shoulder health. Now, I'm sure how many of you guys all heard about the rotator cuff for anything going on with shoulder injuries, right? People put the rotator cuff, at the top of the pedestal is kind of like these king muscle groups for shoulder injuries. Now, that's just one piece of the puzzle, and I put this picture there for a reason because you can see how many different muscles all attach from the trunk all the way through the arm, right? So there are other muscles that are big players, and a lot of people with rotator cuff pain, that's just where the symptom is. It's just kind of, that's where it lights up for people, and then everyone goes and gets you started on some rotator cuff exercises and doing that. But those exercises are very hard to progress over time, and people hit a plateau very quickly, and then they still have some symptoms, and now you're stuck, and you're like, what do I do now? I've been trying all these rotator cuff drills, and nothing seems to work, right? So it's just getting you all to think about, and it's gotten me to think about, instead of focusing in on just one joint, take a broader look, and there could be other things that you may be missing. So in my experience with the people that I've seen with chronic shoulder injuries, the biceps and triceps are actually way more important in shoulder health than you guys might think. Now, the reason I say this is because if you look at the picture of the bicep, it has a direct articulation into the shoulder as well as the tricep. And the tricep actually also has a direct attachment to the shoulder blade, which we know is very important for getting our arm overhead when we're throwing. All right? And last thing, basics always work. So just a point on this is we can get all creative with these exercises, but if we actually just learn to target some basic movements for people, they can actually get a lot better, a lot faster. So how our extremities interconnect with everything. So for example, throwing a baseball. It is a movement that starts from the bottom up, and everything has to coordinate. Your brain has to coordinate how everything is going to work to have this proper sequence of throwing to happen, right? So we can expect all muscles and joints to contribute equally. So kind of what Jay said before, if we're breaking it down into percentages, I'll get into that in the next slide. But everything from throwing a baseball needs to start obviously from the ground up, but I'm just going to tell you guys a little bit from the upper extremity. So the wrist and hand, obviously gripping a ball, needs to coordinate all that force to go into the forearm, to go through the biceps, triceps, and then eventually all through the shoulder to decelerate once we're throwing. Okay, so we need to realize that this whole sequence in throwing is a whole body movement, right? So does it make sense to just isolate and have someone do these exercises when throwing a baseball is an entire body movement, right? So an analogy I like to use for this equal distribution concept that I've learned is think about like anyone when you go out and see like a live band perform, right? You got a singer, you got a guitar player, a drummer, and a bass player, right? And in order to create great sounding music that everyone loves, everyone has to be in rhythm, on tone, whatever you want to call it, right? In order to produce this music. But what happens when maybe the drummer starts going a little too fast, right? It's going to start throwing everyone else off, and someone's like, oh, wait, maybe I got to play a little bit differently just to try and catch up and make sure this song still sounds great, right? So it's the same thing. When things go out of rhythm, you get terrible sounding music. And if you relate it to movement, if we're not having the proper sequencing of movements and joint actions going, then some other parts of the body are going to start trying to compensate and pick up the slack. Because like what Jay mentioned earlier, we still need to get from A to B. And A to B for like a baseball player has to be throwing the ball, right? So the body is super smart and it's going to find a way to do that exact same thing, and it doesn't really care if it starts overstressing other certain bones or joints. All right, so here's a little bit of a picture. Don't criticize me for my art skills, but what Jay said before, so same concept we take from the lower body, we can apply it to the upper body. So we can say that 25% starts at the wrist and hand, 25% goes to the forearm, 25% goes to the biceps, tricep, 25% goes to the shoulder, rotator cuff, right? All equaling 100% when everything is working right. And this is all determined in the background, right? By the nervous system. But what happens when things aren't working how they should? So what happens if the biceps and tricep all of a sudden don't do their job? Now other muscles have to start picking up that work, picking up that slack, right? It's kind of like a relay race. If you think about it, when you have one runner passing on the baton, it needs to happen at a very precise moment with exact coordination. But what happens when it doesn't happen? Maybe the first guy is slow out of the gate. Now the other teammates have to kind of pick up the slack and run a little bit harder just to try to pick up and try to win the race. So the body has no other choice but to call upon any other muscle that's willing to help. And this all happens in the background. And eventually you do that over and over again. Now these forces are just being trapped in one area, or the stress is sent to only one area, one joint, one muscle, whatever you guys want to think about there. So all of a sudden now, let's say we find out that the bicep and tricep aren't doing their job. Now maybe they're working at 5%, wrist and forearm only doing 10% each, and now all of a sudden you get a rotator cuff pain that is overworked, and that seems to be the first thing everyone wants to kind of correct, even though that muscle is already kind of doing too good of a job, and we're missing the big picture of what else could be actually helping out. So here's a quick simple exercise. Like Jay mentioned, midfoot is super important for the foot. The mid hand and the knuckles, super important for the upper body. And this is something that I overlooked very early on, and I've been really harping on it with a lot of people when I see people coming in with shoulder issues, wrist, elbow. If we get to people to load into their mid hand, then this coordination starts from the wrist and hand. It gets work sent into the forearm, bicep, tricep, back of the shoulder, you name it, you can get it all just by placing your hand on the ground and putting adequate pressure through the mid hand. So one simple thing we could do, this is just a core clock exercise, but I want you guys to all just do in a really simple move, a push-up. And I'm gonna show you guys a little bit how we can bias it a little bit differently. So everyone try to do a push-up or get into a push-up position. I'm gonna walk you through The only
You
thing,
can walk me through it if you want.
oh yeah, go ahead. So I'll walk Jay through it here. Just get into a push-up position, and then you guys can try it as well. So I want you just to set up normally and then just do a couple push-ups how you normally do it. So one of the biggest things I notice and I try to coach people through is getting pressure on that mid hand, but specifically the index finger knuckle and the thumb. So if you guys try this out, you guys can go, and Jay, I'll coach you through this. So you can go down like a regular push-up how you want, but as you come up, I want you to place pressure onto the thumb and index finger side knuckle, and you should feel a very big difference. What do you feel?
It's a lot more arms, a lot more forearms, a little more of the inside bicep at the same time.
So try that. Go down into a normal push-up, but when you're gonna come up, try to get that index finger knuckle and the base of the thumb to push you back up, and you should feel a lot more work going through your entire hand rather than just a normal push-up where you may feel most of the pressure goes onto the heel of the hand. And that's where I find a lot of people go with any sort of upper body exercise or a push-up. They'll go down and then they'll really push heavy through that heel of the hand. And yeah, you may feel some pec, but can we get a greater amount of work to the upper body and get everything to coordinate through the upper extremity just by changing how they press into the ground? So this is something that you guys can look at, or your clients, if you guys prescribe push-ups or any kind of upper body exercise, just notice how they place their hand on the ground and notice where they're pushing from. And you'll notice that if you just cue them to put that index finger down and the thumb, you might see them shake. You might see them get a better, workout. You might see greater muscle activation. And that all along is gonna make them happier, and it's gonna make your guys' job a lot easier. All right? So we'll go through this core clock exercise as well. This is a little bit more advanced, so you can try this out with your more advanced people, your athletes, anyone like that. So it's not really a core exercise, it's a full body movement that actually can incorporates the neck, the spine, the rib cage, and your extremities, of course. So I'll coach Jay through it, and then I'll let you guys try it out. It's a very hard move. So which hand do you want to reach with first?
That don't matter.
All right. So I'm going to have Jay stabilize with his right hand. So you set up in a quadruped position. Here's the biggest key. So a lot of people, when you're in quadruped, they'll put a lot of pressure onto the heel of the hand. I'm just going to cue Jay to shift his weight a little bit onto this four knuckles. And now what we're going to do here is, if you're going to reach with your left hand, I want you to keep that left hand nice and stable as you reach forward. Okay, so you're going to come on back. So this is something that really happens often. So a lot of people who say they're going to, you see that they're going to do it, but kind of like Jay just did, he was just kind of crawling along. That tells me that he's not stabilizing all through his right hand. If you actually get that person to stabilize really through here, you should be able to reach, and you'll get a lot more movement and a lot more activation. So you're working on some stability here on the right side while he's reaching forward, and we're getting a lot more rib cage movement. You can see a side bend and everything like that. So try it all out, and I want to see how you guys do. We could just walk around. The biggest thing I see a lot of people say as well when they're doing this is, well, I can't slide my hand across this floor, and that usually just tells me that they're not stabilizing on that hand, on the opposite hand that's not reaching.
You can think about what you're doing right now as like a single arm push-up. And if you want to make it harder, bring your hips in front of you. Go forward so more of your body weight goes to the front.
Will you bend your elbows?
Yeah. Please
Yep.
bend your elbows, yeah.
Slightly bend your elbows.
Please bend
Yep.
your elbows. Good. All right.
Is it a slide or like a pickup?
Yeah, it's like a slide. You want to slide,
Yeah.
reach up through that shoulder blade.
Good. And we'll stop here. And we only have a couple more minutes, so I'm going to bring you guys through the rest of the clock. Simple. We're looking at angles. Most of us are really good forward and backward. When it comes to angles, we all start to fuck up somewhere, especially when a person goes, hey, man, what happened? Yesterday I went down and looked for my remote like this, and I just hurt my back. Well, guess what? Now this became a back exercise, an upper body exercise. So the clock looks like this. You have 12 right here. You have 1 o'clock, and then you have 1 o'clock, and then you have 2. Oh, shit. And then you have 2, 3, and then you have 3. But the load is always on the supporting hand. 4. So now you're bringing the rib cage through a full range of motion as you're stabilizing the distal extremity. So remember what I said, distal stability equals proximal mobility. And this is what this is how you bring that concept to life in the upper extremity. So I'm gonna have you guys just do one whole clock, and when we get to the 6, it looks like this. Underneath, underneath, and then off you go.
And we're gonna do everything both arms.
Exactly, so one hand reach to one clock. Adrian, I'll see that.
Good.
So bend your elbow
bend
when
your
you're
elbow
moving.
and then bring your body forward.
Like positioning.
Like when you reach,
Out will be better.
you want,
Out will be better. Like 45
and the
degrees out
elbow
will be
can
better.
bend as you're going, but
There
you
you
want to
go.
keep all that pressure in that mid hand. Yep, there you go.
Good. Bend the elbow when you reach.
There you go.
This is a great exercise in itself, and it's also a good warm-up exercise before like upper body day, before an athletic conditioning day, which you need this person to go through a variety of
There
range
you
of
go.
motion, especially for sports.
So that's
Like if you're playing
Straight.
basketball, you're reaching this way, you're reaching this way. Now you're pivoting through the rib cage, you're
so you
pivoting
can
through
get
the
this
hips,
whole movement through your spine.
and you get your core involved.
Yep.
So bending the elbow out of the side.
Yeah, yeah. Sweet. Once you guys are done with one round, you guys can stop. This is really hard. When I prescribe this exercise to someone, I would say like once a day or twice a day, and that's it. And there's so many ways you can manipulate this. If someone's really tough at going into 2 o'clock, I'm just gonna go 2 o'clock, hold it for 3 seconds, and then come back out. So great exercise for warm-up, great exercise before upper body day, even a great exercise before lower body day, especially if you're gonna be doing some pivoting motion. If you're doing anything with a rib cage, have to go into different planes of motion. This is excellent for it. Those with back issues, especially the ones that say, hey, I hurt my back, cleaning the tub. Well, guess what? Cleaning the tub requires distal stability on one hand while mobility of the other hand. So those are a couple of our favorite exercises. And I'm just gonna wrap up a couple more slides. I think we have like 3 minutes or so. So this is some of the case studies that we work with. This is a client of ours, have a rotator cuff issue, a shoulder issue, volleyball player, and you can see that almost this scoliotic curve that's happening in the upper body. We didn't go there and do any rotator cuff exercises or any scapular push-ups, because most clinics would probably have him do that, and he had already done that. But when we zoomed out, what we saw was one foot is positioned in a way that's a little bit more pronated, one foot is a little more supinated, which caused a change in the hip height here, which caused a change in the shoulder blade position. Remember how the nervous system works. There's all these detours. And what we did instead is, can we correct the foot position and allow the hip to fall back into a neutral place? And then these are the type of results that we can see within 10 minutes. And that's the power of the nervous system. It needs to know that highway exists so it can take it. But it never knew it exists. You're stuck going on back roads all day. Our goal is to figure out back roads and figure out highways. So when to refer out, I say if things are worsening for your client over 3 weeks and you try modifications, they're just not getting better, at that stage, it would be advisable to seek some help, whether it's me or someone else that you trust. Chronic issues that keeps coming on and going, you guys probably have a lot of people like that on your schedule, like you squat and then they feel great, but 2 days later you can't squat anymore, you gotta go through some modified squat, and it just repeats the cycle. There's something going on with the body, something with compensations that we're not really targeting, and that's why these issues keep happening. Any neurological signs, numbness, tingling, don't mess with it, because nerves are tricky. You can flare it up really quickly and you won't even know you did it until the next day. Or simple movement cleanups. A lot of our clients, trainer will send someone in and say, hey, there's something going on with this ankle. It just doesn't really want to do this. Why? And we clean that up and we send them right back to you guys. And how do we team up with Equinox? Well, we try to keep all your clients training without a pause. Because as a trainer, I used to refer someone else to a physical therapist. and then I just never hear from them again. They just get lost in this rehab realm of rotator cuff exercises and little leg kicks. And then no better afterwards either, which is the worst part of it. And we don't want that for the clients that you see. We want to make sure that, hey, we clean up the movement patterns, we tell you what's going on, they get back on your schedule, and we just say, hey, next time this person do squats, I want you to elevate the heels. When you do a lunge on the right side, I want a little wedge on the pinky toe joint, or something like that to modify things while we work what we need to work on. And we directly communicate with you to make sure that, hey, your program, the rehab, they come together in a place that makes sense. And you have direct contact with us to ask us any questions, whether it is about why we decided to choose one type of rehab versus the other. We're happy to talk about any of the biomechanics